Hello humans! Today I want to talk about this guy right here. This is a Browning knife that I picked up on a local trip to my hunting supply store. Plain cardboard box, which I do quite like. We have our model number and our name. This is the rivet with the copper handles and our motherfucking Proposition 65 warning. Yay! And we have tape. Wow, this box is kind of stiff actually. You just cut the box then. Problem solved. There we go. Alright, recycle this, burn it, do whatever you do with it, but plain cardboard, it makes life so much nicer because you can do those things, right? Even this cardboard tray, I can go out and burn this. My environmental impact is so much lowered, it takes up less space in the trash, it's nicer. It's nicer to be able to have stuff like that. We have our traditional folding roadmap. Okay, knife is sharp. I certainly hope so. Use caution, do not use your knife for things that aren't knife jobs. Never sharpen knife on a power-driven grinding wheel. It will burn the temper from the blade. Yes, that's good advice for most people, but like, I don't know. You can do it if you know what you're doing and you're very careful, right? Know the law, how to sharpen your knife. Ooh, that's actually kind of cool. It has a little figure on how to sharpen your knife, which is pretty useful for, especially for first-time owners or like hunters. Like Browning is definitely a company that markets itself towards hunters. So that is something that, you know, if you're not somebody who's in the knife community, could appeal to you. Take additional care, pocket clips, fixed blade knives and sheaths. Yeah, not tons of useful information on this, but you know, your little how to use a knife information. I do like the little knife sharpening segment though. That's pretty slick. Dog poo bag. Only piece of trash in it, which is quite nice. Yeah. So, looks good, huh? I'm not gonna lie, most of the reason I got this knife is because I saw it on the shelf and it just looked so good. I like a copper knife because it has the added weight to it, right? Like this is a fairly heavy knife and I personally do quite like a fairly heavy knife. Ooh, that flips a lot better than the store model. Liner lock, black wash. Actually, all of the internal components are black washed, which is a nice touch. I feel like a lot of the time when you get a knife that has a black wash blade, the rest of the steel components or like the frame components will be just a plain black coating rather than an actual true black wash. And I do like Browning does do details really nice sometimes, which I find pretty impressive. Drop point blade, copper handle. Obviously, this is going to be quite a heavy knife. You have okay. Some companies get this right, some companies don't. Having either, like here's my Civivi Chevalier, you can see it has the Civivi logo in the pivot, right? Same company as Civivi, essentially does the same thing. I like that. Buck has a tendency, actually they did it really well on the 261 here, where they put the Buck logo on the outside, but there are quite a few Buck knives that I've gotten where the tool insert side, or the socket side, I guess, is on the show side scale, and that's really disappointing because I think it ruins the lines of the blade a little bit. I do definitely think that having a milled design or a smooth pattern or whatever it happens to be on the show side looks just a whole lot better. And then you have two barrels kind of go through, and you have space for a reversible pocket clip, which is pretty nice. You know, reversible pocket clips are good for our lefties out there. Wow, that was snappier than I expected. Okay. That's nice. Is it gonna... No, it's gonna be a little bit too stiff to drop shut. Flipping action is solid. You know, it's a 6 out of 10. A hair above average, but no more. But the thumb stud, that rockets. That's like a 7, maybe an 8 out of 10. That's pretty nice. So, I do have a few tests that I do like to do with new knives. So let's get right into that. We're going to start out a paper cut test. So this is just to see how sharp the actual edge is. Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. Nice and slicey. A little bit of rolling on the edge there, which just suggests that there's a bit of shouldering happening, but really and truly, that was not bad at all. Now we're gonna do the thumbnail test. So this right here is a test that tells me two things. One, it tells me how consistent the edge bevel is, because if it's cutting through the same groove in my nail, it's going to increase in resistance if the angle changes, the resistance on my thumb is going to change. The other thing it tells me is how toothy or how well polished the edge is, how well refined I should say. And this is feeling very well refined. This is actually kind of impressing me. It does feel like it gets a little bit thicker, but not substantially. So now I have a piece of rubber that I just want to cut into to give myself an idea of what the efficiency feels like in a slice. Okay. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. It is definitely, I'm definitely feeling the shouldering at the top of that sort of 3/4 height. I'm assuming that's a hollow grind. Looks like a hollow grind at least. Let me find a straight edge. Yeah, hollow grind. So I am feeling the shouldering there quite a bit, which does reduce something sliciness by a good deal. But it did that fairly well, all things considered. I don't have too much to complain about. And then our puncture testing. Okay, that's actually really nice. That tip, you can see it tapers from, that tapers really nicely done. As a result, it is absolutely puncturing in there with no problem whatsoever. That's actually pretty nice. All right. Materials go back. Initial impressions out of the box. I'm actually pretty impressed with this thing. More impressed than I expected to be with it, to be perfectly honest. I think that this look is absolutely gorgeous. This sort of dark, tumbled, almost aged looking copper is a look that I absolutely adore. This entire thing feels like sort of a very antique feeling piece, despite being quite modern at the same time, which I absolutely love. I do like a liner lock, especially on a work knife, a lot more than I like a frame lock, just because I find them easier, less likely to fail and easier to flip, especially on a smaller knife. Like, this isn't a huge knife. It's not a tiny knife, but it's not a huge knife by any means. Action could probably, just the drop, it doesn't drop at all, but it's not stiff or anything like that. It's just not quite at the point of being a dropping knife. Is it riding off bearings? I think it might be riding on bearings. Is it centered out of the box? It is centered out of the box. I don't know how well you can see that. Thin copper. It is weighty. Like, this feels very substantial for the size that it is, which I quite like. Fits into my hand pretty comfortably. I'm going to be honest, I am quite excited to play with this thing over the next little bit. So, like usual, you know, I'm going to carry this for a little bit, play with it, see how it acts in different situations, see how I like it, and I'll get back to you guys in a couple weeks when I have those results. And we are back. So I've been playing with this guy on and off for about 2 weeks now, mostly on. I have feelings. It's a little bit of a mixed bag, but overall they are quite positive. So Browning rivet, D2 blade steel, which actually surprised me a little bit. I was expecting, to be perfectly honest, at like $60 I think is what I paid for it, something along those lines. I was expecting like an 8CR, maybe a 9CR. So D2 definitely felt good, and like this thing cut really nice. It handled a lot of woodworking tasks a lot better than a smaller blade tends to. And even though it did feel a little bit cramped for some things, and a little bit small if I was trying to process a bigger piece of wood, overall, this was a really comfortable knife for everything that I threw at it. And I actually really did enjoy using it. The black blackwash or whatever the heck they call it, actually ended up, like, it looks fine. You can see it's got some grime and crap on it, but that's kind of what you expect with a coating of any sort. The thumb studs were in the blade path a little bit more than I expected just looking at it. And again, that was mostly when I was doing like any type of hard push through a big long piece of wood, or even cardboard a little bit, but cardboard's not too bad because I could just back up and slice a little bit further down, which really and truly was no issue at all. In terms of flipping action and thumb stud action, honestly, for having both thumb studs and a flipper tab, this has really nice action. Like, to the point that actually surprised me. I have had 3 Browning knives, including this one now, and this is the only one that has even acceptable action. Like, the other 2 are absolutely bad, but this one here, really nice. I would probably put the flipping action, so calling 5 average, like perfectly average, I would call the flipping action about a 6, and the thumb stud action about a 7, especially that reverse flick. That is, man, that feels good. Right? Which, again, for a budget knife, like, good flipping action and good thumb stud action is more than you can expect, right? And I'm considering this VV Chevalier here to be like, this is probably about an 8 on the flipping action. This is a really nice, solid feeling thunk in the action. This right here, I can't fail it if I try. It takes a little more effort than that. Right? But that's really weak. Like, that is me actually trying to fail it. And the thumb studs just go. So yeah, in terms of its action, I would put the flipper tab at about a 6, so, you know, high end of average, and the thumb studs right around that 7 mark. You know, they're good. Enjoyable. Pocket clip. Stood a little bit proud. So it ended up getting bumped. You can actually see where it's wearing. It ends up bumping into things a little bit. But in and out of the pocket was perfectly fine, and the most important thing, it didn't get caught on my welding jacket, and it didn't get caught on seatbelts or anything else like that when I was going out and about, which are very important things to me. Sometimes I get pieces that do end up doing that, and they are awful. That is, by a very wide margin, in my opinion, one of the worst things that a pocket clip can do is just get caught on crap. But yeah, in and out of the pocket, no real issue. It's not, I noticed it a little bit, but it's not really that bad. Liner lock, I really liked it throughout the entire time that I was experiencing this thing. Access, despite not really having much of a cutout, I actually find this to be a pretty easy liner to actuate. And again, having copper handles just makes this thing feel so much more weighty and substantial. This is actually really nice feeling. Action did wear in a little bit from the initial unboxing. And carry depth, it's proper deep carry. There's a little bit sticking out, which is nice for fishing it out of tighter pockets, but overall this is just good and deep carry. So now we're going to get into some of our size comparisons. Up first, we have our wee banter and our Civivi Chevalier. Just line these up. As you can see, it is very, very slightly larger than the wee. It's actually not that slightly, but it is a little bit larger than the wee banter, and it is a fair amount smaller than the Civivi Chevalier. This alone puts it comfortably into what I consider to be sort of a medium-sized knife. It is on the smaller side of that, and it feels a lot like, in the hand, this genuinely feels like a bigger knife than this does, which, not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's mostly just due to the prescriptive nature of this grip kind of cramping all your fingers together. Whereas, even though it has the same sort of a curve to it, this one here just feels so much more accepting to being out of position on it, which means that this handle just makes it feel like a bigger knife than it actually is. But yeah, as you can see, comfortably sort of a medium or normal size knife. Here it is next to our Buck 110. As you can see, it is absolutely dwarfed by the Buck 110. And next to a standard Zippo. Right? In terms of thickness, actually not too brutally thick. Like you can see, it's actually not that much over half the thickness of the Buck 110, which surprises me a little bit. It is quite a thin knife. which means it's also going to be noticeably smaller than, oh no, that's still pretty, it's noticeably slimmer than a Zippo, which again, for its weight, it's deceiving, right? Having actual copper scales, black or tumbled copper or whatever it is they call this, it weighs, like the weight, it feels much, in some ways it feels bigger than it is, and in some ways it feels smaller than it is. Like, it has more weight, and it feels like I should be able to do more substantial things than a knife of its size would allow me to do, and as a result, I am comfortable doing things that I wouldn't normally do with a knife of this size necessarily, but at the same time, that fairly prescriptive handle position means that the handle feels smaller than it feels like it should. Like, it feels like a small knife, even though it probably shouldn't, because it's comfortably within a medium, quote-unquote, knife size. So, in terms of our blade stock thickness, so we have a blade stock thickness of, wow, 95 thousandths. Really? Hold up. That is zeroed. 90 thousandths. Yeah, it's hovering right around that like 90.2 mark. That's actually really thin. That surprised me. I mean, it explains why it had such nice slicing performance between, putting stuff away, between really, yeah, I guess so. Wild. It's thinner than it feels like. Like, this whole knife, size-wise, is surprising me a little bit. Like I said, the actual grip does make it feel like a small knife, and it handles very similarly to how a small knife would. But between the weight of it and the way that, like, it feels doing traditionally more thicker knife things, I was expecting that to be, I mean, closer to like 115 thousandths, not closer to like 90. But you know what? It works, and it is very slicey. It handles a lot of slicing tasks really well, even despite the fact that it's not even a full height hollow grind. Like, it's just a saber height hollow grind, but it just handles stuff incredibly well, which surprises me a little bit. And let's do a quick hardware check. I'm gonna guess, I'm gonna guess T6s around the bat, but I don't really want to. I don't want to be right. I would like to be pleasantly surprised again. But here we go. This is our T6. Oh, that's spinning. That's definitely a T6. Okay. So let me go up to a T8. T8 fits. Okay, so T6 body screws with T8 pivot screw. I mean, T8 everything would be nicer, but you know what? That's actually not too bad. In terms of centering, it's actually stayed really centered, which is pretty good. How thick is this thing overall? Zero. Under half an inch of overall thickness. 412 thousandths. That's pretty wild. That's, wow. That surprised me a little bit. Yeah, I mean, recommendation is a little tricky. A lot of people like carrying a smaller knife because it's lightweight. This is not that. This is significant. Like, it's copper, right? It is heavier than a knife of this size would normally be, and it's heavier than you expect it to be, right? And Browning's QC can be kind of all over the place. which makes it hard to recommend anything really. This one here turned out nice. This particular rivet, I quite like it. I know there is a black micarta version that might help with the weight. Actually, that would help an amount with the weight problem. It still does have full length unskeletonized. Like you can see, there's no internal milling or anything like that for the liners. So it is still going to weigh probably more than a lightweight person would want. But you know what? It fits. I think it's a really handsome looking knife. If you like the look of it and you like D2 well enough, this is recommendable. And I do genuinely think that it is a good knife. It's just weird for me to be... I feel weird saying that about a Browning knife, right? It is going to patina more over time. The brass, or the copper, is going to sort of mold itself to you, the black oxide finish. I don't actually know what a black oxide finish, which is what their website calls this, is going to change over time. I imagine it probably will, but it hasn't changed significantly in the time that I have had it, so do with that information what you will. Mine wore in a little bit smoother than it was out of the box, which I quite like, and the flipping action is absolutely satisfactory. So you know what? If you've got, 60 odd Canadian bucks burning a hole through your pocket, yeah, jump on this. This is, in my opinion, quite a nice knife. The only really big thing about it is on the smaller side of a medium knife, right? And the pocket clip is a little bit proud, but I don't mind that. If you've got big hands, this isn't for you. The grip is pretty prescriptive, and that will make it uncomfortable, but like, this is a solid 7 or 8 out of 10 for me, especially for the money, right? Like, it's just really recommendable, which genuinely surprised me. I'm not used to liking anything. No. Is the Browning Knife Company the same one that makes guns? I think so. Browning guns are pretty good. Browning everything else, I have not had very good experiences with. And it is reversible. I haven't actually tried manipulating this with my left hand. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's nothing special, but I'm not used to manipulating things this finely with my left hand. So if you're a lefty, it fits, and the look is identical, right? You flip the pocket clip over and it has the same, other than having the screw face on the left side and not on the right side, but that's literally the only difference. So do with this information what you will. I absolutely think it's recommendable. I quite liked it. The heat treat felt fine. I didn't notice anything particular wrong with it. It did surprise me a little bit that it was D2. That was nice. Felt nice. So yeah, overall, I like it. I definitely do think that this is a good option. Stay safe and have fun out there. Peace.